From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And for you today, conversations with more county and district extension agricultural agents who are in Manhattan this week for the 2021 K-State Research and Extension Annual Conference, discussing with them what kind of year it's been for their local farmers and ranchers and what challenges lay ahead for their producers in 2021. Featured are Rod and Ryan Schaub of the Frontier Extension District in East Central Kansas and Rachael, Brooke, and Cody Miller of the Phillips-Rooks Extension District in North Central Kansas. And on this week's horticulture segment, the second part of our visit with K-State's Charlie Barden on planting landscape trees in the fall. That's what's ahead on this Agriculture Today. Welcome once again to another Agriculture Today. Glad to have you aboard. As mentioned, agricultural agents from the county and district extension offices around the state of Kansas have gathered in Manhattan for the annual Research and Extension Conference at K-State, and we capitalize on that opportunity to visit with several of them while they're in town about how agriculture has been going in their areas this past year, what's on their producers' minds heading into 2022, and other things. And it's a unique visit we have now from the Frontier Extension District, that's Osage, Franklin, and Anderson counties in east central Kansas, a father and son agent pair. Rod Schaub with us, along with Ryan Schaub, and we wanted to visit about that arrangement a little bit. Rod, you've been in that area as an agent for a number of years now, right?
That's right, Eric. Started in fall of '89. And so Ryan wasn't born until 91. So, he's kind of grown up with Extension. I think he knew what he was getting into when he took his first job in Extension.
Is that the way it was, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. Got started with my career in Greenwood County, was there for about 4 years, and then transitioned kind of back home and then to Anderson County. It's been a lot of learning. I don't know if I knew what I was getting into or not, but I've done a lot of learning since then.
You split up the duties then agriculturally, basically, right?
Well, yes. And when Ryan was first hired on, he was hired on to do the horticulture stuff. And then one of our agents that was doing the agronomy stuff, he moved on to the experiment station. So at that point, then Ryan moved over to the agronomy part. And so, yeah, we split a lot of it. I wouldn't say I do just livestock stuff and he does just crop stuff. We've both been in long enough now that we kind of share some of those duties too.
Do you take time off from talking shop at all at family gatherings, or is that just inherent?
Well, I would say we talk about work all the time. I mean, basically it's one of those things that, well, even when we're doing chores in the morning, well, I've got this to do and he's got this to do, okay, and who's going to be able to come feed cows tonight, or something like that. So, yeah, we talk about those things all the time, and try to work our lives together.
Thank goodness we get along, I guess, because if we didn't, we'd see an awful lot of each other.
That's right. Very good. Well, let's look back at the last several months agriculturally in the three-county area. Again, Osage, Franklin, Anderson counties. And Rod, livestock production, you largely have cow-calf as the predominant species?
Yeah, that's mostly what we have in those three counties. And we have a little bit of stalker stuff, but it's not, we're right on the edge of the Flint Hills. You move a little further west, and that's when the stalkers really get busy. But, yeah, we have some big cow-calf operations in the district as well. So it keeps us busy. We have questions all the time about, rations or pasture management or those types of things.
So what sort of a year has it been for those cow-calf operations, would you say?
Well, if you remember back to, I believe it was February, we had 2 weeks that were miserably cold. We had a lot of calves being born at that time. Yeah, we lost some calves. I got my first question about what do we do when eagles attack baby calves. In Osage County, there's 2 lakes, Melbourne and Pomona. They were both froze over. the eagles were looking for something to eat, I guess. And
wow.
so that was kind of the start. We was really, really cold. When we got into May, we got tremendously wet. Of course, we grew a lot of cool season grass. So we had a lot of brome hay that was put up. The native grass was slow coming on, and then it turned hot and dry in June before it turned wet again in July. So pastures it just depends, when the people put cattle on pasture. If you put them on in the middle of April, sometimes there wasn't much out there for them to eat. And so there's a lot of hay that was fed even late this year. And I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people around the state that have had fall armyworm issues.
Right.
But because of the rainfall that we had, the timing of the rainfall, some of the brome hay got put up late. And that late brome that was put up, let's say the middle of July, it came back up and then got eaten off immediately. And there's a lot of those that there's a lot of concern on whether or not those grass stands are going to live or not. And I'm they're patchy. Let's just put it, at best, they're patchy.
And that's an angle on the armyworm issue that hasn't been talked up as much as planted crops, where it's taken a toll on early planted wheat in parts of the state and so forth. But cool season grasses are vulnerable too, obviously.
Very vulnerable. And it was really unusual. If you opened up a hayfield the 1st of July and then came back the middle of July and hayed the middle out, they didn't even touch. The armyworms didn't even touch what was hayed the 1st of July. It was too mature, wasn't lush enough, I guess, for them, and they just ate the middle of those out, and to the point that I'm really concerned, and there's a lot of producers out there that are concerned they've lost their brome stands, and when you look at fertilizer prices and then you look at seed costs, there's a lot of concern out there about how are we going to get this back to native grass, what are we going to do, and those kind of things.
Well, time will tell, but let's hope that armyworm situation was a one-hit wonder. Planted crops, how would you characterize this past year, Ryan?
Corn was a little bit, there's almost like 2 different seasons of corn. We had some really early planted corn. Then we got super wet, and we got to replant quite a little bit of corn. Talking to different producers around the district, it was nothing to have to plant 3 or 4 times some fields. But corn harvest kind of went through, and it's kind of wrapping up right now. For the most part, I think producers pretty happy with our yields. There's some pockets I think we got some more rain or less rain than others, and maybe not as tickled with those yields as you would have liked. But for the most part, we're sitting pretty good. And now bean harvest is really getting started, and I don't foresee the bean yields being where they've been the last few years just because of the weather we had. A lot of beans were planted pretty late, and we got pretty droughty there end of July, into August, and even into September we were hot and dry. So I think we're going to lose a little bit of yields, but, I think producers are a lot happier with the price this year than they were maybe last year, even at harvest time.
Well, we are into harvest and wrapping up in some parts of Kansas, but producers look ahead, and likely your growers and even your cattle producers are contemplating this overall worry about input costs rising and in some cases skyrocketing. Is that the case?
Most definitely. I think everybody's a little concerned about fertilizer prices or just input prices in general, and what do? Do you cut back this year on putting on some fertilizer and hoping that it'll drop in the coming years? But there's a risk to that even in a pasture situation or a hay ground situation, because what if we get hot and dry next summer and we have to feed some cows hay during the summertime, so what do we do? That's the great question right now.
Market prices are in good shape to great shape in some cases, but it's the other side of the coin. So, Rod, farm management skills are going to be very much of value here.
That's right. They're going to need to kind of know what their cost of production is. They're going to have to look at their fertilizer cost. They're going to have to know what kind of yields that they've been getting, and they're going to have to push some pencils this fall and this winter to determine what is going to be the best management strategy. In the livestock part of it, what are you going to feed your cows as a supplement this year? That's going to be an issue because corn prices are higher, distillers is higher, so maybe we need to look more at alfalfa. If we have a source of alfalfa, see what that price is. There's a lot of things we're going to have to push the pencil to figure out what's going to be the right way to go.
Last thing here, among so many others we could discuss, but as far as your extension outreach program to your producers, do you, for the district, have any special things in mind or in the works?
Well, we do have an Old World Blue Stem program coming up. It's going to be November the 29th. It'll be at Osage City. This is kind of a follow-up meeting from 3 or 4 years ago. There is a real concern that it's spreading. People are becoming more aware of it, so they're seeing it in more locations, and they're wanting to do something about it. So we've got Walt Fick. He's going to come down and talk a little bit about where it came from, maybe a little bit on some control strategies and some of those kind of things. We're also going to have the gentleman from the Department of Agriculture who is the noxious weed director. He's going to come down and talk a little bit about noxious weeds in general, but maybe a little bit about the noxious weed law, how Kansas feels about Old World Blue Stems and those kind of things.
December 10th, I know Dr. Sarah Lancaster is going to be down in Ottawa, and we're going to talk a little bit about some soybean herbicide choices and just get some producers to start thinking about that. Sarah Lancaster is going to come down and have kind of a coffee and donut little session there in the morning, and we're just going to, I guess we're going to hash the hash there. So.
Very good. Folks can check the Frontier Extension District website for full information on those events as they come together. And Rod, Ryan, we appreciate you coming over from conference. The best of luck to you and your producers as we roll out of this year and into next.
Thanks for inviting us.
Rod and Ryan Schaub, yes, father and son, and Extension agricultural agents in the Frontier Extension District of East Central Kansas, specifically Osage, Franklin, and Anderson counties. After the break, we'll hear from 2 more Extension agricultural agents from another part of Kansas here on Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today continues, and with another conversation featuring Extension agricultural agents from around Kansas. Once more, they're all in town for the annual Extension Conference here at Kansas State University. And now we have the 2 agents which serve the Phillips-Rooks Extension District in north central Kansas, Cody Miller and Rachael Brooke. We want to, like we did with our previous guests, talk about how the year past has gone for your producers. And Cody, describe or characterize agriculture in the 2 counties, if you would.
Mainly dry land acres make up a big majority of our district that we have. Predominantly wheat, corn, soybeans, and sorghum would be our main crops that we grow. Do have some forages as well. Very diverse operations for the most part, Eric, on it.
And livestock is obviously not a small part of agriculture in those 2 counties.
Yeah,
right?
Eric,
Rachael?
yeah. A lot of cow-calf is what we have in the counties, as well as goat numbers are increasing as well. So that's been fun and interesting to see.
What's prompting that then?
You know, a lot of our 4-H kids are predominantly showing some goats at the county fairs, and then just some producers that are wanting to control some weeds and doing some rangeland things with goats as well, with invasive species and those kinds of things.
How has 2021 treated your producers, by and large? And on the crop side, first of all.
Yep. So crop-wise, we go back a year ago, and if we think of wheat drilling and everything, very dry, very interesting getting the crop to even come up. A lot of the wheat we thought we were going to write off going through the winter, and spring rolled around. We had some tremendous wheat that they were going to terminate at some point. The stars lined up, and we were very blessed in that regards, Eric. As we go on through the summer, same thing. We started out really good with our summer crops, if you will. We certainly could have used some more rain and timely rain in the midsummer, but as we're getting into harvest, things are pleasantly very surprising. Most of the producers are completing soybean harvest, some yields all over the boards on it. If they caught that rain or had the moisture, some tremendous yields on it. Same thing, corn. We're pleasantly surprised on some of our corn yields as well. And same thing with the grain sorghum also there. We really started early on grain sorghum this year. Plants were still green, but grain was dry and able to get some acres out of it. Forage production, we did not have as big of an issue with the alfalfa weevils this year, thank goodness, as we did a year ago. So forage production, we've had some very, very good forage crops as well.
So chalk it up as a solid crop production year.
Yes, and you combine that with decent crop prices, some guys very excited.
Rachael, as you mentioned, Phillips and Rooks counties are cow-calf country. There's no doubt about that. Predominant enterprise in that area. How has this year gone for those producers, do you think?
It's gone well. As Cody alluded to with the crop side, we've been dry at different points this summer. So our pastures, our grasses struggle a little bit through that. But I think our calf weaning weights and those kinds of things, I think will pull out and do really well this year.
What is pressing as far as things on your producers' minds right now, do you think, Rachael?
For both crop and livestock, I think those input costs. As things continue to go up, we're watching those inputs to see what we can do to continue to make a profit. And we'll just have to continue to do that as we go along. On the rangeland side, and even in crop areas too, the Phragmites grass that continues to be an invasive species in our area. And we've held some field days trying to help people with how to control that and working with them in order to get that done and taken care of.
We, on a statewide scale, don't hear much about that particular species. You might outline it a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. So Phragmites, in our particular area of concern, there are native populations, but the one that we're seeing as an invasive came from out of country. And so it's continued to grow. We kind of wonder if it didn't come from the Nebraska area to start with. They've dealt with it for many years, and we've held meetings with them, and they have some of their specialists that have been down to help us with their research and the things that they've found that will help control the Phragmites grass. It's invasive. It gets into those wetland areas, and it just takes over. And I think as a state on the whole, we'll continue to hear about it. There's not just one particular chemical. We have some that we can try to put together to keep it under control, but it seems like it's an annual process. You think you have an area under control, and the next thing you know, it's spread a little bit, or its roots and stolons have gone, rhizomes have gone another way, and so then you're continually trying to control that.
So it's similar to something like Johnson grass, spreading with its rhizome growth and so forth.
And seed as well. So birds, wind, it's a mess.
Cody, as Rachael said, inputs are high in the minds of producers, and fertilizer costs repeatedly cited as one of those main worries.
Yeah, and that working with producers, what their crop rotation is going to look like. With that said, Eric, nitrogen, as you know, is almost doubled in price. Phosphorus, just ridiculous, unfortunately. You couple that with the fact of the chemical prices that have taken a huge jump as well. But not only that, also, even if you can just get those products, the fertilizer, the chemical, etc. I know a lot of producers that are trying to get those booked and actually physically get those in their possession, just that way they have them moving forward, where they would wait until spring to take delivery of it, trying to do that as quickly as possible. So, and while we're on that, the chemical side as well, just the uptick of resistance that we've seen in our crops, that is very disturbing. In our area, we've seen producers that have been long-term no-till that have actually brought some steel out, and twofold there. One, they can't kill it with the chemical, and then two, just trying to cut down on some of those input costs as well. So it'd be very interesting to see where we're headed.
There's a great deal going on. So you as Extension agricultural agents, what conversations do you expect to have with your producers in the coming weeks?
Sure. Right now on the livestock side with the cow-calf sector, the conversation is, do I keep my calves, wean them, and feed them for a while? Or with hay prices being good, do I sell calves off the cow and sell some hay too? To help with those input costs and those kinds of things. So that's our conversation currently.
And thinking outside the box in terms of input management and decision making.
Right. And that's, right now, a lot of producers trying to get through harvest, and then once they get that, figuring out what they're going to be doing. I really strongly encourage some of those to get a plan and try to lock some of that stuff in. There's several producers that may wait until spring to do some of these things traditionally, and if you can get this stuff figured out and have that plan moving forward, I think that's going to pay big dividends for certain anyway.
Do want to finish with this. The Phillips-Rooks District does have a few educational opportunities coming up in the winter stretch. And, Rachael, you have some details, one of which for beef producers is not long from now at all.
That's correct. November 3rd, Eric, to be exact. We'll be in Phillipsburg at the Phillips County Fair Building. It starts at 8:30 that morning with registration. The welcome and introductions get kicked off at 9, and we'll be going all day till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So
it's billed as the Central Kansas Beef Summit, right?
Correct, yes. There's been many agents that have been part of this planning committee, Eric. Hope that all of our livestock producers can come out and attend and enjoy a good lunch and some good refreshments as well, since 3rd Street Bakery is doing our catering for us that day.
And the rundown can be found on your website, but just to mention one of your keynote presenters, there's somebody that's featured on this broadcast regularly out of Oklahoma State University, Darrell Peel, on the markets.
Yes, and he's our one of our lead speakers for the day. Our keynote starts at 10 a.m., so like I said, it's a don't-miss event. Sure want to be there for his presentation, but also joining us that day, first thing that morning at 9:10 is Dr. Sandy Johnson, one of our K-State specialists, and she'll be going over preg checking as well as managing opens. We've got Dr. Greg Hanslachek, Dr. Justin Wagner, and then Stacy Minson with our watershed district, and they're going to be covering weaning considerations, feed inventory, and then water as well. One of our other big things that we're really looking forward to in the afternoon is our producer panel. They're all cattle producers that are doing different things. They'll have some good tips and tricks for those that are looking for something different for their own cattle operations.
Excellent program. Again, Wednesday, November the 3rd, the Central Kansas Beef Summit at the Phillips County Fairgrounds. And quickly slipping in a couple of other learning opportunities that the district will sponsor.
Yeah, and we've got another statewide event that will be happening in the winter months of January as well as February. It is a Women in Ag program that we're, presenting, but all people are welcome to attend. It just doesn't have to be for women. And it's titled the Cropland Risk Management Series, and then we also have a beef cow-calf risk management as well. So the dates for that will be January 12th, the 19th, the 26th, as well as February 2nd for the cropland side of things. And then for our beef cow-calf side of things on February 23rd, but just trying to get some great information as far as risk management principles to our producers on both the crop and the beef side of things.
All particulars, again, at the Phillips-Rooks Extension District website. So you've a fine lineup of things coming up for your producers, and we appreciate you two coming over from the annual Extension Conference and having a chat with us right here. Rachael, Cody, thank you.
Always a
Thank
pleasure,
you.
Eric.
From the Phillips-Rooks Extension District in north central Kansas, Extension Agricultural Agents Cody Miller and Rachael Brooke. On this part of Agriculture Today, and we'll be back with this week's horticulture segment for you next here on the K-State Radio Network. We're back on Agriculture Today, and with this week's horticulture segment now, welcoming back in Charlie Barden, K-State Forester, as we conclude our two-part look at planting ornamental trees here in the fall. Excellent time to do so. Now, Charlie, last week we discussed species selection for good adaptability to Kansas conditions and site preparation, digging a big enough hole for that new tree. Today, more on the placement itself. But you say you want homeowners to thoroughly check over that tree's root ball first.
Right. Before you put the root ball in the hole, look for girdling roots. That's something we're seeing more and more. Trees have been growing in a pot for part of their life, and they'll have a circling root that'll hit the edge of that pot and make a circle all the way around the root ball. Those circling, girdling roots are very important to get those removed and cut. If they're like a pencil-thin diameter, you can just untangle them and kind of tease them out and get them straightened out. But if they're as big or thick through as your finger, they're too stiff, they won't do that. You just have the need to cut them. Actually take your pruning clippers with you and cut some of those roots where they're circled. If not, that girdling root gets bigger and bigger in time, and it actually can choke off the stem, just like you pinch a hose and you stop the water flow. Those tubes that carry the water in the tree or get pinched off and crushed. and then it can't carry sap up and down the tree trunk.
That's an important step here. What about the burlap holding that ball together? Need it be completely removed?
Need to remove as much of it as possible. You can leave some of the burlap in the bottom of the hole. It'll break down in time, but definitely get it from the upper part of the root ball. Some root ball covers are like a plastic burlap, like the material that they have for tube sand or like that. And that material, you really need to remove that from the bottom of the hole because it will break down in the sun and in the UV light up above the soil surface, but down in the soil it won't break down because it doesn't get exposed to light. And that can be a real problem with roots growing through that woven material, but then getting pinched off or girdled the next year when they try to grow in diameter.
Then you're backfilling that hole. Anything to think about there specifically, Charlie?
Right. One thing is if it's a container-grown tree grown in a pot, it won't be actually filled with soil in that pot. It'll be actually a mixture of mostly pine bark, wood chips, a little bit of peat moss in it. If you can take your fingers and remove some of that potting media from the root ball, same time as you're teasing out those girdling roots, and replace that with true native soil at the time, it'll hold moisture much, much better.
You fill the hole back up with soil, and you don't tamp it down. Some people have that temptation.
It's better just to kind of flood it with a lot of water, let the water naturally settle that soil into the ground. And if you water it again a few days later, it may settle a little bit more. You need to add a little more soil to keep the roots covered. Also, another important step to look at of the roots is you should have the buttress roots or the main horizontal roots just about at the soil surface or just slightly above or below. You don't want them buried too deep. Once the soil is well settled with a thorough watering, then you can add mulch to insulate that root system.
What kind?
Yeah, any kind of mulch works well. Pine chips, pine straw, regular straw or hay. What we like to do for fall planted trees is actually not mulch them right away if we can wait, because we want to get several waterings in there to settle the soil. And then once the soil gets cold, later in November, then mulch it then. You're kind of like putting it in cold storage. You're keeping that root system cool and dormant for the winter.
And staking those trees, stabilizing them in our brisk winter winds, or winds year-round for that matter in Kansas.
Yeah, and in staking, if the tree is about 6 feet tall or less, then the location is in the town or city where you're fairly sheltered, you probably don't need to stake. But taller trees than that, or if you live it out on a rural property where you get the exposed winds coming off the prairie or adjacent crop field, that's when we recommend staking. A homeowner-type tree, 2 stakes is going to be plenty. You want to wrap those loops around the tree trunk and the stake. You want to have it loose enough so it moves a little bit in the wind. And also, you don't want to just tie a wire or a rope directly around the trunk of the tree. You want to run it through a surgical tubing or an old garden hose so there's some rubber cushioning between, because if you don't do that, the rope will chafe onto that trunk and cause a dead spot on the trunk by the wind just rubbing it back and forth.
Very well. Well, that's our look at succeeding with fall landscape tree planting. Charlie, we've appreciated the input. Many thanks.
Thank you.
On this week's horticulture segment, K-State Forester, Charlie Barden. And our time's away once more. As always, thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.